Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing the 33rd film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, The Marvels. So, what was I expecting when going into this movie? Well, before I get to that, let me give a quick recap on my thoughts on the Captain Marvel movie. Basically, while the film itself had mixed reactions, I was one of those people that thought it was alright-ish. I liked the movie enough for what it did right. Like, I liked Brie Larson as Carol Danvers, I liked her acting, I liked the action, and I loved the arc that she went through about discovering her true self and uncovering her falsehood of her identity and figuring out basically about the secrets of her past. However, the film also lost a lot of points for me because the writing wasn't really that good. Carol Danvers as a character, she really needed to be better written herself, since there's a lot of informed attributes about her, and the whole twist with who was the bad guys and who was the good guys really did not feel built up to properly. And as a result, the film was kind of a mixed bag, though it did have a lot more in it that felt off than it did that stuff that worked. Again, I don't hate the movie, liked it for what it did right, but I will not defend it and say it's a perfect superhero movie, so to speak. As such, ever since that movie, Carol Danvers' reputation in the MCU, in a meta sense, has kind of been mixed as well. Some people genuinely like her as Captain Marvel still, while others are dubious about her at all and feel like that she really has no place in there. Some people think that she's a great empowering figure for female superheroes, while other people think that that role was better filled by other characters in the MCU, which I'm not totally disagreeing with, but I'm also not totally agreeing with either. Basically, Captain Marvel's status in the MCU at this point was just, it's complicated. Even to the point where Brie Larson herself was feeling a little disillusioned with the role after all the negative reception that she got. But nevertheless, the Marvel and MCU continue pushing her to the forefront, that's more so done in this film than any other way, since after all, this is now the first sequel that Captain Marvel has had, as we're now checking back in with her and seeing that she's starring alongside other light-based superheroes that are kind of following her footsteps. So when the Marvels was initially kind of hinted at or talked about or even given release dates, some people were I want to say, I guess, dubious. I can at least think I was a little dubious. I didn't think the film looked bad, by any means, but I was also going in with a grain of salt, because I already knew how Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel was perceived by the greater fan base, plus, again, the first Captain Marvel movie was, again, a mixed bag. So I really had no idea what they were going to be doing with the Marvels and how well they were going to actually make a sequel to Captain Marvel. Would they learn from the mistakes of the first one, or would they just end up making more? Would the film actually be entertaining, or would it ultimately just crash and burn? Again, it was one of those films that I was kind of wary of. Didn't get to the point where I was like, oh, I don't think this film's gonna do well, but it did get to the point where I was cautious whenever it was actually brought up. With that said, though, when the film eventually did come out, reception to it was still mixed, though thankfully it leaned more into the positive than with the negative. So I was a little curious about it. I heard how some things worked about it, how some things didn't, how some things were amazing and fun to watch, while other things kind of dragged it down. So while I still carried the film with a grain of salt, at the very least I was a little bit more optimistic and hopefully thought that this film would be more enjoyable than the first Captain Marvel movie. Was it, though? Well, let's take a look at it and find out. Today, we're going to be talking about the Marvels, and a couple heads up. First, before I went and saw this movie, I did decide to go and watch 2 MCU shows prior to watching it. The first was Ms. Marvel, and the second was Secret Invasion. The former is more important to this film than the latter. I only really watched the latter because that had Nick Fury as the main character, and Nick Fury is one of the characters in the Marvels. To my knowledge, sorry, Chindy's jumping on the bed and is messing with the camera. To my knowledge, Secret Invasion really has nothing to do with the events of the Marvels, so ultimately I just wasted my time there. Though there was some entertainment. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that. That's a question for another day. On top of that, I'm also going to be revisiting some of the shows I've watched for previous movies, like WandaVision, as stuff from that show. It is once again important to the Marvels, especially with one of the characters. And finally, and I cannot stress this part enough, if you have not at the time that I'm doing this vlog, the Marvels has only been out in theaters for 2 weeks. So if you plan to see the movie and don't want to go in spoiled, turn back now, because I'm spoiling the plot rotten. I'm going to go over every major detail of the story, and I am not sparing anything. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, turn back now, because I am not holding anything back. We good? Okay. So anyway, let's get to the long-ass plot summary. And of course, the film that's a sequel to Captain Marvel actually kind of starts out with Captain Marvel, as we see Carol Danvers flying in space in a spaceship that she has. Basically, it's just a place where she can put her feet up, kick back, relax, and just essentially catch her breath in between missions. And it's a nice little place. She's got a bed, she's got a dining area, a coffee. She apparently walks around in Crocs, and it turns out that in between movies, she wound up coming into possession of Goose, the Flurkin cat that Marvel used to own. So she seems to be doing all right-ish. She does seem a little forlorn when we check in on her, but for the most part, she seems to still be keeping busy. Which is what kicks off the plot for this movie, as after she has kind of a bit of a nightmare involving flashbacks from stuff that happened in between movies, which we'll get into later. She ends up getting a call from Nick Fury, who it turns out, as well, if you saw the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, has a new spacefaring job. Basically, we're kind of expanding on that plot point more. It turns out that after Nick Fury came back after the events of Avengers Endgame, he was put in charge of a space station called Saber, and if Secret Invasion is anything to go by, he spends most of his time there. And basically, Saber is meant to just be like it's basically meant to be Earth's liaison space station for the rest of the universe. This is how they commune with other races in the universe, how they exchange ideas, how they keep up with what's going on in the galaxy, and so on and so forth, which makes sense, because after the events of Avengers Endgame, I feel like that stuff like that would be necessary, as they encounter characters like Thanos. We want to allying with the Guardians of the Galaxy in that, so maybe it is a good idea to keep track of what's going on in space. So yeah, Nick Fury is there, but either way, he's calling Carol because something strange is going on. A little while ago, the space jump system, the thing that people use to go from planet to planet with their spaceships without having to, physically fly from planet to planet, seemed to have a major surge that went throughout the system, and they wound up detecting it on the Saber space station. Now, thankfully, Nick Fury was able to send out some people to kind of keep track of everything and keep everything in line, but whatever the surge was, the source of it was at a planet that Carol happens to be nearby, and so he wants to ask her if she'll be willing to investigate, which Carol does very readily, much to Nick Fury's kind of surprise. However, what also gets Carol's attention is that when Nick Fury mentions the people going out to repair the space jump, he mentions a certain name that Carol is familiar with, Monica Rambeau. I'll have to get back into that. So, remember Carol's friend Maria Rambeau, and how in the first Captain Marvel movie she had a daughter? Yeah, the daughter is Monica. And it turns out Monica's been a bit busy in the MCU since we last saw her. So, let's go back to WandaVision for a bit. So, you remember how in WandaVision, one of the major plot points in that show was Wanda having her mental breakdown and casting a hex over the entirety of the town of Westview, pretty much just trapping them in a pocket universe wherein wherein all the citizens were living out a sitcom that centered on Wanda and Vision. Well, it turns out Monica was kind of involved in that. It turns out that Monica was one of the people that was snapped away in the 5-year blip. And unfortunately for Monica, she sort of did not come back to a happy home. Because you see, before she was zapped away, it turns out her mother had gotten cancer. And while prior to the blip, her mother had beaten cancer and was in recovery, in the 5-year gap, the cancer wound up coming back. So when Monica wound up returning, she returned to nobody, and as a result, she was kind of overcome with grief. To try and get past that, she wound up throwing herself into her work, as her mother had set up the organization Hammer, which I might have talked about when I discussed Doctor Strange, but it's been a while, so I don't remember exactly. But basically, it turns out following the blip, Hammer was kind of grounding all of their agents, Monica included, so they were just dealing with Terran threats, which is where the Westview thing came in, as Monica was called out there to investigate the Hex, and let's just say she got a little too close. She wound up coming into contact with the Hex itself, and doing that wound up resulting in her being absorbed right into Westview and being integrated into the sitcom as a supporting character. Now, eventually, Wanda realized that Monica was not from Westview and that she was from Hammer, from the secret organization Hammer. And upon Wanda realizing it, she wound up literally throwing Monica right out of the Hex, with Monica being one of the first to figure out that Wanda was the one sustaining the whole thing. As a result, Monica was one of the few people that wanted to end the threat with the Hex by actually talking to Wanda, but her boss, who was the same asshole who wound up grabbing what was left of Vision's remains and was essentially rebuilding him from the ground up, wanted to essentially end the whole thing with Wanda violently, as he planned to use her as a scapegoat. As such, Monica, with the help of other agents, wound up going under her boss's Put simply, she said screw you to her boss and decided that she was going to force her way into the Hex either way. However, it turns out the thing is, because the Hex was made up of strange supernatural energy, passing through the Hex kind of had an immediate effect on the person, which we saw with Monica as she was altered to fit into Wanda's whole sitcom reality. But she had already been sent through the Hex twice, once when going into Westview and once when coming out. And her body was essentially exposed to all that extra normal radiation. So going through the Hex a third time would essentially mess her up something fierce, but she said, fuck it, I'm doing it anyway. And so she forced her way through. And as a result, she was able to get back into Westview with her mind still intact. But yeah, passing through the Hex enough times did wind up altering her physiology to the point where she actually got superpowers. Essentially, she now has the ability to control and manipulate and absorb light waves, which allows her to essentially phase through objects, see energy outputs, and even shoot energy rays if she wants. And as a result, she wound up using those powers to try and talk to Wanda, which didn't work. Then she helped Wanda try and fend off her old boss. Then Wanda fought Agatha Harkness, and blah, 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 superhero hijinks ensued. Point is, once the whole Hex thing was taken care of, Monica wound up still keeping her powers, and at the end of WandaVision, she was actually approached by some of Nick Fury's people, which in this case is another Skrull, to join him on Saber, which is where we see her now, as she's using her powers to try and repair the jump point stabilizers on the Saber space station. As such, once it's all taken care of, she and her team are getting ready to head back inside, her team is getting ready to head back inside, but she decides to stay out of the space station to try and, make sure everything is stable. And as she's doing a spacewalk, she sees a jump point still active, and decides to go and investigate it herself, which Nick Fury notices, and he tries asking her what the hell she's doing. However, as she's doing this, we then cut back to Carol as she arrives at the planet that Nick Fury directed her to. And upon arriving, she does soon find the source of the jump point surge, as she finds what looks like an unstable jump point that seems to be leaking with some sort of exotic energy, which is leaking into the planet below, which Carol is a little confused by, but she decides to get in closer and investigate. And which at that point, as she's talking with Nick Fury about all this, her comms get mixed with Monica's, and at first Carol's like, "Oh, Lieutenant Trouble, is that you? Come on." And, she's happy to talk to her, but Monica is, not exactly happy to talk to Carol for reasons we'll find out later. But either way, regardless of this, both Carol and Monica begin getting closer and closer to their respective disturbances, and Carol's a little bit curious about this as she approaches the malfunctioning jump point and actually starts reaching out to touch the strange energy, with Monica doing the same on her end as she reaches what looks like she reaches the jump point that's still active and gets ready to touch it as well. And suddenly the energies from within start intersecting with both women before suddenly both are zapped, at which point they both change locations. In the case of Monica, she ends up where Carol was on this other planet, while Carol ends up in a kid's bedroom. Which kid's bedroom? Well, it's here where we need to talk about the third main character of this movie, Kamala Khan. And it's here where I also need to talk about the Miss Marvel show. Let me talk. For those of you who haven't watched my Spider-Verse vlogs, allow me to explain who Kamala Khan is in the context of the MCU. Put simply, she is a young Muslim American girl who is essentially a big fangirl for anything superheroes. More specifically, Carol Danvers. She loves Carol Danvers, draws fan art of Carol Danvers, makes cosplays of Carol Danvers, writes her own Carol Danvers fan fiction. If there's any bit of merchandise with Carol's face on it, odds are she owns it. And put simply, she just loves every bit thing about Carol. So much so that when her hometown of Jersey was planning to do an Avengers Con to kind of celebrate everything the Avengers had done, Kamala wanted to go to Avengers Con because, she's a fan. Her parents, however, did not want her to go because they're a little strict, loving but strict, and they didn't want her going there alone. With even their own prerequisite for her even going at all is that she had to go with a parent and had to wear the costume that they made for her, which would have made her be Hulk Jr. and her dad being the Hulk. It was weird but funny. But either way, she wound up defying her parents and went to the thing anyway. But she took with her a little bit of extra. You see, shortly before Kamala wound up going there, her grandmother had sent a box of old junk to her family. And in that box of old junk was a bangle that belonged to Kamala's great-grandmother. While Kamala's mother at first just kind of brushed it off and said not to worry about it, Kamala herself liked the look of it and wound up taking it with her when she went to Avengers Con. And so as she was getting herself ready for the cosplay contest, she wound up putting on the bangle. And it turns out this was a very special bangle for her family, because the instant she put it on, it altered Kamala's physiology. Put simply, it gave her superpowers. In this case, unlike in the comics where Kamala was an Inhuman who had shape-changing abilities to the point where she could grow big, be small, stretch out her body, and even shapeshift, in the MCU, she wound up gaining light-based powers, allowing her to create hard light objects at her own disposal. She could use it to make platforms. She could use it to essentially create hard light constructs. And put simply, she gained cosmic abilities, which she later learned part of the reason why the bangle brought these powers out was because, well, Kamala's family were special. Her great-grandmother was actually from another dimension, was part of a group of beings that had another name, which I do not remember, but were called Jinn in our world. And so basically Kamala wound up inheriting those extra normal abilities, and the bangle allowed her to gain access to them, so much so that she doesn't even need to wear the bangle in order to fully utilize them. Of course, this led to this whole plot line of Kamala learning about her family history, encountering the side of her great-grandmother's heritage, who wanted to use the bangle to get back to their home dimension, even though it would have resulted in the destruction of our world, and so on and so forth. But the point is, utilizing these powers, Kamala decided to become a superhero. Eventually, with her parents eventually figuring out that she had powers when her mother caught her using them to hold back the dimensional tear. This dimensional tear. Again, you gotta actually watch Miss Marvel. Point is, her family learned she had powers, and while they weren't exactly happy about her being put in mortal danger, they were supportive of her trying to use her abilities for the right reasons. So they helped make her a costume, and so after she trained with her abilities, she wound up taking on the mantle of Miss Marvel, which she's more than happy to do because, well, I already said she's a fangirl for Captain Marvel. Which, yeah, she didn't pick the Miss Marvel name to intentionally copy Carol. It's basically just a whole thing that translates to what her name would have been or something like that. Again, Again, it's explained in the show, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. Point is, she wound up taking on the name Miss Marvel, and she's been acting as a superhero ever since. But the thing is, Kamala's also kind of tied to those things with the jump points. Because you see, the reason why the jump points are acting up in the first place, they're the result of our baddie for this movie. Basically, I'm sorry I'm using the notes for this, but I did write her name down. The bad guy for this movie is a Kree is the new supreme leader for the Kree Empire. Her name Darban, and put simply, she wants to save the Kree from destruction. So remember how at the end of Captain Marvel, Carol wanted to go after the Great Intelligence? Turns out she did. She went straight to the Kree homeworld of Hala and just blew through their forces and then annihilated the Great Intelligence, which unfortunately did not actually help the Kree at all. In fact, it left a power vacuum. And as a result, people continually tried to fill the Supreme Leader's seat, and unfortunately, that led to Hala getting into a Kree civil war, which unfortunately drained the planet of its resources something fierce, to the point where the entire planet is almost completely uninhabitable, with the Kree essentially just staying on there out of stubbornness, but which sucks because their atmosphere is so bad that they can barely breathe in it. Their oceans have dried up, and for whatever reason that I still do not understand, their sun is dying. It is essentially dying out. So Dabra, I'm sorry, I gotta go back to her. I gotta still remember her name. What was it? Darban wound up eventually taking the seat of the Supremer, and in an attempt to try and find a means of helping her people, she wound up seeking out this strange bangle, which, yeah, it turns out is meant to be the other half to, it's meant to be the other bangle that essentially acts as the companion to Kamala's, and utilizing its power, Darban has been making these new jump points, which has been causing the surge. And, well, she's the one responsible for all that. But the thing is, because of the residual energy from her bangle, well, it turns out it's having an effect on Kamala, who's wearing the other one, and since Carol and Monica were touching her corrupted jump points, it's resulted in the three of them getting entangled and swapping places. With like I said, Monica being at the alien planet that Carol was, Carol now swapping places with Kamala and landing right in her bedroom, while Kamala herself is now out in space outside the Saber space station. Thankfully, she's protected by Monica's spacesuit, as I guess that didn't get warped off with her. And of course, Nick Fury, who was overhearing this whole switch going on, is wondering what the hell is happening. Which leaves him even more confused when he sees this random teenage girl flying around in Monica's spacesuit, freaking the hell out. Before she kind of calms down when she sees Nick Fury, is like, "Oh my God, is this an Avengers thing? Am I in an Avengers thing right now?" Which I find hilarious. I love that. But either way, with Carol, she's wondering what the hell is going on, especially since she's wound up clearly in a fan's room, which is plaster with her face on everything. As such, she ends up running downstairs when she runs into Kamala's family, but her intent is to fly back into space, and the instant she tries, she ends up swapping places with Kamala again, with Kamala landing right there on the front porch, and Carol and Monica themselves also being sent back to their proper places, which could not have come at a bad time, because when Carol warps back to the planet that she was in, she's finding herself in the middle of a Kree fight, which she's able to beat back the Kree, but she wants to know exactly what the hell's going on and what Dabron is planning, but the Kree only really telling her that it's too late, and Dabron's already gone to the planet of, I think, Tarnax? Again, I'm sorry I'm using notes, but I have to remember. Tarnax. To the planet of Tarnax. Which is basically just a planet that used to belong to the Kree, but is now acting as a refuge for Skrulls, since, after the events of Captain Marvel, they're intergalactic space refugees at this point. As such, Carol ends up beating back the rest of the Kree and relays the message to Nick Fury that whatever Dabron is planning, it has to do with the planet. It has to do with Tarnax, and so Carol's going to go and see that. Fury thinks this is a bad idea because it turns out that the whole meeting on Tarnax is actually a peace treaty. Basically, Dabron is going to the Skrulls with a message of peace, and basically, if anything goes wrong, it could have egg on the faces of everybody involved. But Carol, realizing that Dabron is up to something, pretty much just says, "Screw it, I'm going there anyway." As such, she ends up taking her ship and flies there, and to try and kind of stay under the radar, she cloaks her ship upon arriving, and then disembarks once she gets close enough to the Kree ships, with her just flying in, carrying Goose with her, and just trying to be stealthy. In the meantime, Kamala and Monica are kind of trying to come to terms with what has happened to them. With Monica and Nick Fury quickly realizing that somehow Kamala's involved in this, since, she was the one floating through space, and Monica quickly realizing that something's going on with their powers. As such, Fury and Monica end up taking a space elevator down to the planet's surface because they plan to go meet with Kamala. But in the meantime, Kamala herself is just kind of being chewed out by her parents because, she disappeared randomly, and then Captain Marvel appeared in her place. And when Captain Marvel and Kamala swapped places, Carol destroyed Kamala's closet door. So her parents are kind of freaking out about this, but Kamala herself is freaking out in a very much different way. She's quickly realizing she's in the middle of some big serious shit, and she is more than happy to be involved. Unfortunately, though, things start getting more hectic again, because as Carol is sneaking through the Kree ship on Tarnax, she ends up getting spotted by some Kree soldiers, which in turn results in a fight scene. The only problem is that once Carol starts using her powers, she starts switching places again, as she and Kamala once again swap places. Or more specifically, her, Kamala, and Monica. As Kamala is now on the Kree spaceship, while Carol is on the space elevator going to Earth with Nick Fury, while Monica is presumably at the Khan household. And from there, things just start getting hectic all around, as Kamala is wondering what the hell's going on, and I have to remind you, Carol came to this Kree space station with her alien cat, who proceeds to eat a pair of Kree soldiers, which when Kamala sees that, she freaks out, but when the more things get more hectic, she grabs Goose and uses her powers, which results in her and Monica and Carol swapping places again, and it just keeps getting, from here, things just get even more chaotic, as in the midst of all the jumping and warping across time and space, the Kree soldiers start getting pulled along with them, as when Kamala arrives back at her house, Goose spits up the soldiers that he ate, which in turn attack Kamala and her family. Some of the soldiers end up getting warped to the space elevator, where Nick Fury and whatever Marvel he's fighting with, that's there right now, is helping him fight alongside them, while at points everyone keeps getting warped back to the Kree spaceship. It's a hectic fight scene, but it's a fun one, as the entire fight scene, regardless of location, is essentially in close quarters combat, with everyone utilizing the powers very expertly, very nicely, and actually working off of each other well, whether they know it or not. It's actually really cool. It's actually just a very fun, very nice fight. Actually, very fun, very fast-paced, and very exciting fight scene, which is just made even better when everyone keeps jumping around places and essentially is coordinating with whomever they can coordinate with, depending on the place that they are in. So I dig it. It's a fun fight scene. I love it. But the end result of it is that the Kree soldiers on the space elevator get taken care of. The Kree soldiers of the Khan household get their asses kicked to the point where they all get knocked out, and the Khan family ties them up, and back in space. And back on the Kree space station, on the Kree spaceship, they end up taking out the remaining soldiers that join the fight there. So when Carol is back in her proper place, she tries going back into stealth mode, resulting in her going to a main control room, where we see the Kree soldiers essentially just, plotting out something, as they seem to be mapping out a bunch of planets that they plan to hit. With Carol, of course, seeing all this and deciding, okay, I gotta do something, so she powers up and gets ready to start kicking everybody's ass. Good stuff. But in the meantime, back on Earth, we see Kamala and her family just trying to clean up after all hell broke loose, because their house kind of got trashed in the middle of everything. But it's at this point when Nick Fury and Monica show up and essentially begin wanting to exchange notes with Monica. Which, yeah, it turns out that that Nick Fury and Monica actually do have intel on Kamala because with the events of the Ms. Marvel series, of course, they want to keep tabs on Kamala and her family. Which, yeah, what I like is that the thing that that has the intel is this essentially this clear tablet, this clear glass tablet, which Kamala thinks is cool, and guess what? She keeps, because it gets left on her couch after this is all over. But put simply, Monica pretty much shares her theory about how somehow her and Kamala's powers have gotten intermingled to the point where every time they use them, they swap places, and how Carol Danvers is involved in that as well. But when Kamala hears about how their powers have been ensnared with one another, well, she tries to give a demonstration of her light-based abilities, since Monica mentions how all three of them have light-based powers in some way. Unfortunately, though, the instant that Kamala tries using said powers, she ends up swapping places with Carol again, who is not exactly happy to be pulled out of the fight. However, when Carol sees Monica there, at first she tries to be all chummy, but Monica is keeping her at a distance. Either way, though, Monica does relay to her the whole powers intermingling, we're swapping places thing, which Carol doesn't exactly like, because I have to remind you, she was in the middle of a fight before she got warped, and so she quickly realizes, oh shit, I gotta get back there, I gotta help Kamala, because they do mention Kamala by name. As a result, she ends up running outside and tries activating her powers, which doesn't end up working, as it's clear that as basically in order to swap places, she and Kamala have to be using her powers at the same time. But ultimately, they do end up swapping places when Carol flies away. As Carol flies into the sky, and then there's a zap, and there's Kamala. And Kamala's powers don't exactly give her the power of flight, so yeah, this isn't going to go well. As such, Kamala is falling to the earth, and while Monica tries using her powers to grab her out of the air, she's having trouble, grabbing someone while flying, so things are kind of going to hell in a handbasket. Thankfully, though, they are somewhat saved, as Kamala and Monica do end up getting close and end up getting close, and Kamala, to try and save them, ends up throwing up a light barrier to try and hopefully stop them from, becoming a stain on the sidewalk. But as they're falling, that's when Monica and Carol end up swapping places with Monica and Kamala end up swapping places with Carol, which in turn causes both Kamala and Monica to end up on the Kree ship, which, yeah, they have no idea what's going on, so realizing that they don't want to keep switching around, they just put up their hands as they're surrounded by Kree soldiers, which is where I'm sorry, I keep going back to look at her name. Which is where Darbin comes back in, as she was on the Tarnax Planet Service trying to negotiate something with the Skrulls, which, yeah, she was, even when she was doing peace talks, she was being explicitly threatening with what her plan was. But she gets called back up when she hears about the disturbance with Carol and these two extra people, because, yeah, the Kree kind of blamed Carol for what happened to their planet, since it was her destroying the great intelligence that instigated the Civil War. As such, upon hearing that these two random girls are somehow tied to Carol, she wants them dead. And, well, with Carol being involved in all this, she decides, okay, we gotta get our plans going as quickly as possible. As such, Darbin ends up taking the other bangle and ends up taking the other bangle with the intent to use it. Though before she does, she tries to fry both Kamala and Monica, which she fails at, as at that point Carol winds up flying in through the window, having apparently flown all the way from Earth to Tarnax. So good on her, I guess. But as a result, the trio of Marvels end up trying to fight Darbin and her men, but it doesn't really go well, as again, because their powers are still entangled, they keep swapping places, and as a result, they're a lot less coordinated. However, they are able to take out enough Kree, but Darbin herself ends up leaving and flees to the planet's surface. As a result, Carol and Monica end up flying after her, with Carol coming back to pick up Kamala. But by the time they get to Tarnax's service proper, it's too little too late, as Darbin is just immediately damning the Skrulls for allying with the Annihilator, as she calls it, and how this is going to be their proper punishment. And at which, yeah, she was planning to do this anyway, but hey, this gives her the excuse not to help the Skrulls find a new place to live. So, good for her, I guess. But either way, she ends up taking her bangle, and the thing is, so remember Ronan the Accuser's staff from Guardians of the Galaxy? She's no one using it now, and as she bangs her bangle on the staff, she ends up creating a second jump. She ends up creating a new jump point, much like the one that Carol saw at the place where she discovered the planet where Darwin discovered the bangle. And upon the jump point opening, essentially it begins siphoning everything it can right into it, essentially raising the planet's surface. As a result, immediately Carol, Kamala, and Monica's plan immediately has to shift to catching the bad guy, just saving as many innocent civilians as possible, which is a task easier said than done because again, this thing is sucking up literally the atmosphere of the planet. So anytime anyone gets on board a ship, it gets sucked through the jump point. So essentially it's clear that they're not going to be able to save everybody, but they're at least trying to save whoever they can. With Carol, upon realizing that ships are being sucked into the jump point, end up calling her ship down so they can get as many Skrulls on there as they can. Unfortunately, though, well, things don't go well. While they are able to save as many Skrulls, they are able to save whatever Skrulls they can grab, that's still not a large number, as Carol's ship is only so big. And as a result, while Kamala wants to stay behind and save as many people as she can, Carol tells her they have to go now, otherwise they won't be able to even save the people they have now. And so as a result, Carol, Monica, and Kamala reluctantly leave the planet, thankfully with some Skrulls saved, but the remainder of them unfortunately dying in all the carnage. So yeah, things are not going so well. However, there was method to this madness, as it turns out the reason why I'm sorry, I keep forgetting her name. What is it? Darbin? Yeah, as it turns out, as the reason why Darbin did what she did. Well, remember how I said that Hala was ravaged by the Kree Civil War? It turns out that her way of trying to restore Hala is by stealing resources from other planets. And the reason why she attacked Tarnax like she did was because, well, she wanted to steal their atmosphere. By utilizing the bangle, she was able to open the jump point to essentially suck all the air out from that planet and send it straight to Hala, which in turn restores their breathing air so they don't have to wear gas masks anymore. But that's only 1/3 of the equation. They still need a viable ocean, and their sun is still dying, which the sun part is going to be easier said than done, as Darbin is told that her bangle does not nearly have enough power to reignite it, and if she tried, it would probably kill her. But she's going to cross that bridge when she gets to it, as she still has other targets that she wants to go for. In the meantime, back with the Marvels themselves, the Skrulls they saved are not exactly in high spirits, because, well, they were in the middle of a peace talk, and now any chance of them having a home on Tarnax is just dead in the water. So they're not exactly happy with Carol right now. Thankfully, she's still able to find them a new refuge, as she ends up giving a call to Valkyrie from New Asgard, who comes by, picks up the Skrulls, and brings them back there. But spirits are still not exactly high. While Carol is apologetic to Kamala for forcing her to leave all the Skrulls behind, they still need to figure out exactly what to do from here on out. Because after all, it's clear that Darbin is still planning to do something out there, and it's best that they figure out what it is. Especially since, well, her opening the jump points the way she is kind of doing damage to the rest of the universe. They compare it to, like, fracking. Hold on a second. Apologies, delivery person. But Yeah, they describe what Darwin is doing essentially like cosmic fracking. Basically, the more unstable jump point she creates, the more it kind of just starts destabilizing the whole jump point grid, to the point where if the whole thing goes down, it could cause ripples across the galaxy, which could result in everybody dying. So they gotta stop her as quickly as possible. Thankfully, Kamala is able to get some intel. As while she saw Darwin, she did get a good look at Darwin's bangle and realized it was the other bang that was the second bangle to hers. Which, when she shows it off to Carol, Carol's able to identify exactly what it is. It turns out this bangle is something called a quantum band, with which was one which put simply, basically the bands are like meant to be the whole baseline for jump point technology, as utilizing both quantum bands together would allow for extraplanar travel, basically spatial jumps, teleportation, and so on and so forth, which Kamala can even account that the bangle kind of does that, as during the events of the Miss Marvel series, Kamala wound up getting sent back in time to when her grandmother was a child, even meeting her face to face. But put simply, these things are very much powerful, and well, they believe that if they can get a these things are very much powerful, and well, knowing what they are, hold on one second. Apologies. But yeah, basically they know that it's not a good idea. Basically, knowing about the quantum band, they are able to get a better idea of what Dabron is doing, and that she's clearly trying to open up gateways across galaxies, which of course leads to the cosmic fracking thing, and so on and so forth. As such, it becomes a matter of figuring out what her next plan of attack is, and sadly, they don't really know what to do. While the Kree did have a star chart, none of them really got a good look at it. Well, most of them didn't. Kamala did, but because she's mostly an Earthbound girl, or entirely an Earthbound girl, she has no idea what any of it means. But Carol has a way of actually looking into Kamala's memory. So remember how in Captain Marvel, the Skrulls use these mind things or whatever to look into Carol's brain? It turns out Carol's been keeping a bunch of them on standby. And the reason why? If used properly, it can actually allow someone to still dive into memories, and if used in conjunction with others, it can allow people to essentially share memories and see them from someone's perspective. Which, the reason Carol still has them is because, well, she's still trying to parse through her memories, as she still has not fully undone what the Kree did to her. She's still trying to get her memories back little by little, and these devices have helped kind of jumpstart her neurons, so she can still, get her memories back. Though even now the process is slow, and she has not regained everything back. So, yeah, it takes a while. But either way, Carol's able to convince Monica and Kamala to use them as well, and so the trio of ladies are able to peer into all of their memories, and sure enough, this does allow them to peer into Kamala's memories and see the star charts. But unfortunately, because everybody involved is inexperienced with these things, some unrelated memories end up getting mixed into the process, including some of Monica and Carol when Monica was still a little kid, and also a very tragic memory involving Monica's mother. Because it turns out, in the 5-year gap, Carol went to go see Maria. And when Maria's cancer came back, she basically wanted Carol to take Goose, the Flerken cat. While Carol initially tried refusing to take the cat, well, essentially Maria didn't take no for an answer, because she at least wanted someone to take care of the cat until Monica got back. She didn't think that she would survive this bout of cancer, which, seeing those memories, kind of gets an emotional reaction out of Monica, to the point where she actually violently leaves the memory thing. And while Carol is apologizing to hell and back, Monica's not exactly happy, because you see, it's at this point when the tensions between Monica and Carol start coming to light. As it turns out, the reason why Monica has been so cold to Carol, well, it's because Carol never came back to Earth. Because at the end of Captain Marvel, Carol promised Monica that she would come back at some point, which Monica happily liked, because, well, she loved her Auntie Carol. She wanted to see her again. but she never saw Carol again for like 3 decades. And in those 3 decades, shit went down. After all, going back to the blip thing, her mother fucking died, and Monica had no one to turn to. She wasn't able to see her auntie, and as a result, she felt abandoned and alone. As a result, yeah, her and Carol's relationship. As a result, Carol is not exactly her favorite person right now. And as such, when Kamala even hears about everything that Monica went through, she does try to give her comfort, which with Kamala giving Monica a hug, and even Kamala even ushering Carol to come in and join the hug, which is kind of amusing but also heartfelt. But either way, with this emotional bit out of the way, they at least now have an idea of what the Kree are after, as they're clearly targeting previous planets that they occupied and are now kind of independent planets. Although they're still not fully understanding what Dabron is doing. However, they are able to put the pieces together a little bit at a time and quickly realize, okay, she's stealing resources from these planets in order to get Hala back up and running. But even when they figure that out, they still need to figure out where Dabron is planning to strike next. And it turns out they do know, because after all, if she's stolen atmosphere, then she needs to refill Hala's ocean somewhere. And it turns out that Carol does know a planet that would kind of fit into that purview, as it was a planet that the Kree once ruled, and its surface is 90% water. And that planet is, if I can find the name of it, Aladna. And it turns out, while Carol is willing to go to Aladna, she's got a bit of a history there, which I kind of love how they hint at what's going on, as clearly she wants to avoid any topic of discussion about Aladna beyond going there for the mission. But needless to say, it's funny. I'll give you that. It's funny. However, Kamala's still involved in this after all, and while her parents are naturally worried, so after all the shit that went down, Nick Fury wound up taking Kamala's parents and her brother to the Saber space station. And while Kamala's parents aren't exactly happy with her flying off into space, well, Kamala and Monica let them know that they kind of need her for the mission because, entangled powers and all that junk, and ultimately that they will take care of her, which this does get Kamala's parents to reluctantly accept all this, though they're still a bit cautious. Though enough of that shit, because we got hijinks on the Saber space station. Because when Nick Fury brought Kamala's parents back to the space station, he also took Goose with him, and Goose is acting a little strange as he's coughing shit up and seems to bloat it out a bit, which even Kamala's mom starts wondering. And on top of that, after Goose is acting up, strange pods begin appearing all over the station, which begins sabotaging the station's electrical system to the point where most of their escape routes and weapons and other monitoring systems begin going down, to the point where the station is now becoming a lot less safe than it is, especially with I keep forgetting her fucking name. God dang it. Where Darben's space jumps are having a more adverse effect. And you want to know why this is going on? Goose is pregnant. Yeah, Goose is actually having kittens. Adorable Flarkin kittens, but kittens nonetheless, and those pods are their eggs, so to speak. So, yeah, that's a plot point. I'll get back to my thoughts on that later. But the point is, back with the Marvels, they are actually continuing to train with their powers as they realize they gotta get this whole switching places thing down, otherwise they're just gonna keep getting in each other's way. And so while we get a quick montage of the three of them training with their powers and figuring out how to properly utilize them and take advantage of the switching, eventually they do end up arriving on the planet of... They end up arriving on the planet of Aladna, and it looks like a pretty decent planet, though once they arrive, Carol kind of goes in disguise as she ends up wearing a big hat. And as a result, the trio end up getting down to Aladna, and we soon learn one of the cool little quirks of this planet is everyone speaks in song. That is not a joke. Every person on Aladdin speaks through song. That is their that is their baseline language. To the point where anyone speaking in anything that's not a song, they don't understand. I kind of wish I was making this shit up. But make it even better, once Carol arrives back on the planet, it turns out that everyone there knows her. She's their princess. Yeah, Carol states that at some point in the last few years, she wound up having a marriage of convenience with their prince because of political strife and all that. But yeah, she's officially a princess on Aladdin to the point, and the people all revere her. It's kind of hilarious. But either way, the Marvels are here on this planet for a reason, and so that reason is they gotta warn the Aladdin, the prince of this planet about the danger with Dabron. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting her name. She's a very forgettable villain. Darben. I don't know why I keep forgetting her name. But either way, the Marvels end up making their way to the prince of this planet, and Carol is able to tell him through song that they're in danger and that Darban is coming to this planet to steal their oceans. And which also leads to them finally ending the song, because it turns out the prince is bilingual, so he can speak in languages other than song. But either way, they are able to talk to him, and they are able to get a plan in motion to face Darban. Basically, once she arrives, the prince will keep her talking and content, and while she's distracted, Carol and Monica will go in and attack Darban, in an attempt to try and get the quantum band off of her so that she doesn't open another unstable jump point. Which, as a result, the prince prepares his people for battle, and because he's got a trio of superheroes here, which funny thing, what I love is that there's a running gag throughout the movie about Kamala trying to give Monica a code name, but Monica is just not going for it. But either way, they are able to give Carol, Monica, and Kamala new superhero outfits, which I dig. They look cool. They fit each character's general style, so to speak. But either way, basically, Darban and the rest of the Kree forces end up arriving, and once she arrives on the planet's surface, she does end up meeting with the prince, who's got a bevy of soldiers on standby, and she does demand that he surrender. He says "fuck off," and when she tries attacking, that's when the Marvels attack, which again does lead to a pretty kick-ass fight scene between the people of. I'm sorry, I forgot the planet's name too. Which leads to a kick-ass fight scene between the soldiers of Aladdin and the Kree soldiers, with the Marvels trying to do their best to actually duke it out with Darban. However, Darban, realizing that they need to act quickly, ends up making her way to one of her ships, and while Monica tries to cut her off, it's still not exactly an easy battle to win. As such, while Monica and Darban end up fighting on the top of the ship as it flies away, Carol wants to get tagged in, as she manages to, which, as a result, Carol and Monica end up swapping places, and we see Carol trying to tell Darban not to do this. They can find another way, but Darban is not listening, as she's more than willing to destroy this planet because of Carol's personal ties to it. As a result, Monica does end up flying back in because, again, she can fly, and so she and Carol do their best to try and duke it out with Darban. But back with all the soldiers, we see that Kamala is fighting alongside them, and ultimately, in the course of the battle, she ends up using her powers, and she and Carol end up swapping places. Which, the instant that she and Darban get close to each other, their quantum bands begin reacting to one another. And, the instant Darban sees that Kamala has the other one, immediately Kamala starts becoming a very important person for her. But Kamala quickly realizes, okay, can't let her get this thing, and tries making a run for it, which in turn leads to her creating more light constructs to fly away on, which in turn causes her and Carol to swap places again, which allows Carol to re-enter the fight. Unfortunately, though, it's too little too late. Despite Carol and Monica's best efforts, Darban does manage to activate her quantum band and opens up another jump point, which in turn starts siphoning the ocean right out of the... I'm sorry, I keep forgetting this planet's name. I don't like that I keep forgetting. Yeah, it begins immediately siphoning the ocean right out of Aladdin. So, yeah, the good guys failed here. As such, I mean, immediately they realize at this point the Marvels realize they have to leave this planet. They can't do anything to stop this at this point. So the best course of action is just to bail as quickly as possible. As such, Kamala and Monica end up making their way back to Carol's ship. But as for Carol herself, she's continually flying around and trying to stop Darban from leaving the planet, but she fails. With Darban now actually exclusively targeting Carol and her ship because she wants Kamala's quantum band. So yeah, immediately the Marvels really need to get out of there because they cannot let the bad guy get the other one of these things. As such, Carol does manage to fly in, but rather than prioritizing an escape route, come on, Carol wants to just take Darban out to the point where she's getting right. She takes the ship right into a firefight in the middle of all this carnage as she flies around shooting at other Kree ships, trying to get to Darban, while other Kree ships are zeroing in on them and about to hit them with missiles. So, yeah, Carol's not exactly thinking clearly. As such, Kamala decides to make her own call for the greater good, as she uses her powers and swaps places with Carol as they're both in different seats on the ship, and she activates a jump point, pretty much causing the ship to fly to another random planet. Which, yeah, Aladdin is sadly lost as the ocean is sucked out of that planet and sent to Hala. But the bad guy thankfully has not gotten the other quantum band. So yeah, it's at least. So at the very least, they lost one battle, but they can still keep fighting. However, Carol's not exactly happy with the decision that Kamala made, and while Kamala apologizes for it, but even though she knows it's necessary, we soon start getting more into Carol's drama. Because, well, throughout the whole movie, the Kree have been calling her the Annihilator, which I've mentioned here and there, but never really outright addressed. But, yeah, Carol is fully aware that the reason there is a Kree civil war and why Hala is as ravaged as it is because Carol took out the Great Intelligence. It's because of her that there was a power vacuum, and it's because of her that all this shit with the Kree is even happening at all. And Carol blames herself big time for it. Basically the guilt of everything is weighing on her conscience. And that was the whole reason why she never went back to Earth to see Monica. She could never come to terms with the fact that she was the Annihilator, the Destroyer, and all that jazz. Basically, she just thought, and basically as a result, she just stayed away from Monica as much as she could because she thought, if I can fix this, if I can make sure this never happens again, maybe I can make this up, because ultimately, she just didn't want Monica to see her as the Annihilator. She wanted to be Captain Marvel to her, this great hero that she could look up to. But, well, enough is never enough. She spent years trying to make up for a mistake that she could never undo, so she never came back. However, as such, once this is revealed, Monica is understanding and does feel sorry for Carol, but she also tells her that she didn't care, it wouldn't have mattered either way. Carol is her family, so is essentially like family to her. So of course, it wouldn't have mattered if she was the Annihilator or Captain Marvel. She was still Auntie Carol to Monica, and she would have happily loved to have her there, even if she was still like the Annihilator. So it's a nice little sweet moment, but ultimately it's cut short as ultimately Darban has gotten her plans all set. Darban has already gotten 2/3 of the things that she wants. She's gotten the atmosphere, she's gotten another planet's atmosphere, and now she's got another planet's ocean. There's only one thing left that they need to refill. They need to reignite their sun. And at this point, the trio of heroes realize that Darban is specifically targeting planets close to Carol. And since we've already hit 2 of those worlds, there is only one more planet that Carol would give a shit about: Earth. As such, immediately the Marvels decide they got to get back to Earth and warn Nick Fury. But then it gets back. But of course, the Saber space station is still dealing with all the Flurkins, and with everything going to hell in a handbasket on board, everyone has to abandon ship. Though, because of all the damage to their circuitry, even escape is now very limited, as there are very few escape pods left, and the ones that are available cannot get everybody out of the space station. So we get some more hijinks to solve the issue. So you know how Goose can literally eat anything regardless of size and or girth. Turns out that trait was also passed along to Goose's Flurkin kittens, as they are able to literally eat everything, and ultimately Nick Fury thinks it'd probably be easier to send a bunch of Flurkins into an escape pod rather than an entire space station of people. So his means of trying to try and get everyone off the space station? Let the Flurkins eat everybody! I can't decide if this is stupid fun or just plain stupid. I don't know. But either way, when the Marvels arrive and try and give Nick Fury his warning, they see what his plan is and immediately begin helping him as they try and herd as many cats as they can to eat as many people on board the station as they can. I wish I was making this shit up. But ultimately, the plan is successful. The majority of the space station crew are eaten by Flurkins, and the remaining ones are thrown onto escape pods, with Nick Fury and Kamala's family immediately getting into another one and trying to fly back to Earth. However, it's here where Dar-Benn finally manages to make her way to Earth, and Monica thankfully manages to figure out where her ship is, and quickly realizes what Dar-Benn is planning to use to reignite Hala's sun. Earth's sun. Yeah, she's planning to just outright steal energy from the sun and fuel it straight into Hala's sun. Or just steal the sun outright. I don't know. Point is, though, take out the sun, everything on Earth dies. So, might want to stop that. As such, after a bit of a crash landing with Nick Fury and Kamala's family, Carol, Kamala, and Monica quickly realize they need to take the fight straight to Dar-Benn because they need to get that other quantum bangle off her. And as such, while it is thrown out there for Kamala to potentially just leave the bangle behind, well, with all the damage that Dar-Benn is doing, they're probably going to need the power of both bangles to undo it. So ultimately Kamala decides that she needs to bring hers with anyway, regardless of whether it's a danger or not. And as a result, the Marvels end up making their way to Dar-Benn's ship, and, well, we get a final battle between the trio of heroes and Dar-Benn, as Carol flies in and tries to talk Dar-Benn down, but Dar-Benn makes it clear she's not backing down. She demands that Carol hand her the other quantum band, which Carol says no to, at which point at that point is when Monica comes in, punches out Dar-Benn because she floated in behind her invisible, and then as a result Monica switches places with Kamala before flying in proper. And so the ass kicking commences as Carol, Kamala, and Monica just begin utilizing their powers and abilities to essentially just whoop Dar-Benn's ass. And it's fun. It's actually a pretty fun fight scene. And pretty much it's a curb stomp battle. While Dar-Benn is able to hold her own enough in the battle to the point where she's able to get a few good licks in, well, it's at this point the Marvels have actually managed to coordinate a lot better with their powers, abilities, and the switching thing. So every time that Dar-Benn gets an advantage, they're able to outmaneuver her and take that advantage away from her. It's actually a pretty fun fight, and and I like how well coordinated it is. I dig it. But the end result of the fight is that Dar-Benn ends up getting launched into a part of her ship, with the rubble landing on top of her, and essentially stabbing her right through the gut, pinning her right there. As such, immediately they tell Dar-Benn to give them the bangle, but she refuses, even though they could just take it right off her wrist right there, but whatever. And at which point she immediately starts damning Carol for dooming Hala, since it was because of her actions that the Civil War happened and how the son of Hala is now dying. Again, don't know how the Civil War affected that, but whatever. As such, Monica proposes that maybe Carol could just outright fix that damage, as after all, her powers do utilize absorbing radiation and energy, so maybe she could use her powers to reignite the sun. Something that Carol kind of doesn't know if she can actually do or not, but they do. Monica says that she at least needs to try, so Carol kind of accepts that. As such, they promise Dar-Benn that Carol promises that she'll do that for Dar-Benn, and so with it looking like that Dar-Benn now has a means of saving her people, immediately Carol starts pulling rubble off of her, But of course, Darben's a very vengeful bitch, and so the instant she gets free, she immediately knocks Carol aside, grabs Ronin's staff, and immediately attacks Kamala, holding the staff right over her and telling Carol that if she moves as much as an inch, she will kill Kamala right where she is. As such, with Kamala right close by, Darben immediately takes her quantum band and then sticks it on her wrist, essentially empowering her with the powers of essentially empowering her with their full capabilities. As such, she immediately lets Kamala go because she got what she wanted from her, and with the powers of both bangles charging through her, she gets ready to open up a new jump point. But at this point, Carol realizes she can't let her, and so Carol charges at her and flies her right into space near the jump point that she made to suck up the sun. And while Carol and Darben struggle a bit, ultimately that struggle ends with Darben knocking Carol right off of her, and so Darben, with the power of both bangles, bangs them both together, which in turn causes a large cosmic event, which also tears Darben apart, killing her right there. Ultimately, the bangles are okay, but yeah, things are kind of going to hell. Thankfully, Monica's able to go out into space and grab Carol. Carol was able to grab both quantum bands, so everything's fine. So everything's fine in that regard. But it turns out that Darben's actions kind of resulted in a lot more going wrong than right. Because when she activated the quantum band, she did more than just open up a new jump point. She ripped a hole in space-time, essentially opening up a gateway between the MCU and another random parallel universe, causing both to now start seeping into one another. And if this problem is not fixed, it could spell the end of both realities. So, everything's kind of going to shit. Thankfully, whatever Darben did also seemed to unentangle the powers of Carol, Monica, and Kamala. I'm assuming it's because she actually utilized the bands properly. Plus, Kamala only got entangled because she was wearing the band. So essentially, taking her out of the equation was like breaking a link in the chain. I don't know. It's never fully explained, but I'm guessing that it has something to do with the bands being reunited. Point is, the Marvel's powers are no longer intertwined with one another. So while Kamala is able to get her quantum band back, there's still a matter of having to close the rift. And Monica thinks she may have an idea. Basically, if Kamala can utilize the power of both bands, basically she and Carol can just blast Monica with enough exotic energy, which she can immediately use to fly right to the other side of the space-time rip and use the energies to essentially repair it from the other side, which everyone finds to be a bit risky, but everyone decides they have to do anyway. As such, Kamala arms herself as she gets both quantum bands on, and so as she bangs her wrists together, both she and Carol are able to hit Monica with enough exotic energy that she actually starts literally lighting up the room. It's actually pretty cool. I dig it. But either way, using this energy, Monica's able to fly straight into the event horizon of the rift, and true to her word, she's able to use the energies to literally start tethering the hole back together and closing the rift. Unfortunately, though, in order to do this, she kind of has to stay on the other side. And while Carol tries to fly out and save her, it's too little too late. Monica knew this was going to be a one-way trip, but she was willing to do it because, well, someone had to be sacrificed to save the universe. And so while the rip in time and space is closed up, sadly, Monica is now as she said, stuck on the other side, with her now trapped in a random parallel universe, while Carol and Kamala are on the other side. So, yeah. But that also kind of leads to some wrapping up. After all, with Darben dead, the threat to Earth is now past. The Earth's sun is thankfully left unharmed. So Carol ends up sending Kamala back to Earth on her ship, while Carol herself immediately decides that she has to kind of keep her promise to Monica as she flies back to Hala, and well, she is thankfully able to use her abilities to reignite Hala's sun. So, good on her. She was able to fix that mistake. But there's also the matter of but ultimately there's still some more wrapping up to do, as Well, Carol and Monica were able to make up, and Carol at least thinks it's time to stop running from her problems. And as a result, she decides to start living on Earth. Or she gets the Khan family to move into a new home. I think she gets her own house. Basically, Carol ends up moving into Maria Rambo's old farmhouse, with the Khan family essentially helping her carry stuff, which I kind of like. It's nice. It's nice that they kind of formed a positive relationship with Carol now, which is kind of funny considering that in the Miss Marvel show, Kamala's family, especially her mother, was a lot more critical of Captain Marvel because they thought she was too reckless. Plus, they thought her jumpsuit was too tight. But I like that she's now essentially a family friend to them. It's sweet. But yeah, as they're helping Carol move into Maria's old home, well, Maria and Kamala kind of have some bonding time as the two of them end up going to Maria ends up going to Maria's old biplane, which the two of them can't fly because they don't actually have the keys, but basically Carol wants to keep this thing intact for when Monica eventually comes back because yeah, she and Kamala may not know where Monica is out in space. Monica is in the infinite cosmos, but they know she's alive, and one day she'll at least come home. So I dig that. It's nice. But as this feel good moment comes to an end, Kamala begins pondering that it was actually pretty nice to be part of a superhero team. And while it sucks that Monica isn't around anymore, she would love to do the superhero thing again, or superhero team up again, which leads to Kamala having an idea. And the film soon ends as we get a hint of more things to come, as we cut to the hideout of one Kate Bishop, aka the second Hawkeye. And before anyone asks, no, I have not seen the Hawkeye show. I will probably watch it eventually when Kate becomes an character important to another Marvel film, but I didn't know she was important to this one, and I didn't put any time aside to watch Hawkeye, so sorry. But either way, as Kate Bishop arrives back at her hideout, we see that Kamala is there waiting for her, utilizing the tablet that Monica left in Kamala's home. Kamala was able to get as much intel on Kate as she can, and put simply, she wants to put together her own superhero team of young superheroes. With her asking with Kamala even mirroring Nick Fury when Nick Fury went to recruit Tony Stark at the end of Iron Man. That's funny. But either way, Kamala asks Kate if she wants in, and it's implied that Kate says yes. So I dig that. But we're still not done. While that was the official end of the movie, we got ourselves a mid-credits scene to look at. And this one actually allows us to check back in on Monica, as the universe she landed in was not just some random barren parallel world. It turns out it was indeed a full-on alternate reality. As when Monica begins kind of regaining her senses, she finds herself waking up in an infirmary. Which infirmary, she doesn't know yet, but what's of importance is that when she wakes up, she sees that there's someone resting nearby, keeping an eye on her. And this someone looks like her mother, Maria Rambo. With the instant that Monica sees her, she's just full on in tears, just happy to see her mother. And when her mom wakes back up, she's like, "Wait, your mom? What? Your mom? What?" But Monica is just too overjoyed to see her that she can't really think straight. However, Maria doesn't seem to recognize her, and we soon learn why. Because, well, we soon learn which universe that Monica landed in. The world of the X-Men, which is immediately confirmed as we see who's actually been in charge of Monica's medical facilities. We see which doctor's been taking care of her, and that doctor is the Beast, played by Kelsey Grammer. Thank God. But yeah, he's able to figure out that Monica's from a parallel universe, which he thinks is impossible, but he also says that's probably the most likely outcome, but hey, it's the superhero business. The impossible is possible. But either way, Beast leaves Monica in Maria's care, because Maria is actually one of the X-Men, and her superhero name is Binary. And while while Beast himself wants to go off and talk to Charles Xavier about all this. And so the scene ends with Binary looking at Monica and asking her who she is, with Monica realizing she's kind of screwed. So, yeah, that was The Marvels. What are my thoughts on the movie? Overall, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's definitely I will say this. The Marvels is definitely a lot better than Captain Marvel by leaps. I will compliment it for that. I think the writing is more on point. The character interactions I feel are amazing, and Carol's character definitely got a much needed upgrade from what we got in Captain Marvel. But with that said, the film is flawed. I cannot deny that the film is flawed. And sadly, one of the first flaws that I think the film has is tonal dissonance. While for the most part the film is able to keep pace with its tone and know exactly what it is and what it's trying to go for, it does have moments where it kind of starts veering into the realm of absurd and honestly very stupid. And the two scenes that I think embody this more than anything is the scene with the planet of Aladna and the Flurkin subplot, which, yeah, I'm not going to defend either of those scenes that much. They both feel way too silly for this movie. Now, I don't completely hate either subplot, believe it or not. When I saw this movie both last week and today for this vlog, I was kind of trying to figure out whether I thought both scenes were the fun kind of stupid or just the plain old stupid. And I kind of fell somewhere in the middle when it came to both. As the stuff with Aladna, I kind of enjoyed from a pure silly sense, but it feels so out of place in the rest of the movie because the rest of the film is not as silly and zany as this scene. The rest of the film, while it has its fun moments, it definitely takes advantage of some sillier stuff with having Kamala there since she's a superhero fangirl. The whole thing with Aladna really just feels dumb. It's not again, I don't know. I can't really figure out if it's a good dumb or a bad dumb yet, but it's certainly memorable, though it also kind of clashes with what the rest of the film is going with. As a result, it sticks out, but whether it's for the right or wrong reasons, I don't think I could tell you. And sadly, that same practice also goes in place with a Flurkin subplot, which, while the idea of an entire space station needing to be being hunted down by these adorable alien kittens that are eating them all one by one is kind of hilarious, it also just feels weird in various ways, and it just feels it feels way too out of place considering what's been going on in the rest of the movie. Again, I'm not saying the rest of the movie doesn't have sillier moments, but this moment feels like it's just one of those the fuck am I watching kind of moments. And it just feels very out of place, which I think I can really just say for the whole Flurkin subplot for the whole Flurkin subplot. It feels out of place. I can honestly say that if you cut out everything with the Flurkins and them overtaking the Saber space station, nothing would change in this movie. It's really unnecessary and doesn't really affect the plot that much. Really, the only major contributing factor that it does is that it disables Saber, which, yeah, that's another thing I forgot to mention. Saber also wound up in... Basically, Saber actually did provide assistance to the planets that were ravaged by Darwin's whole space jump thing, which I'm guessing that part of that what helped fix the space jump issue was her getting access to the quantum bangles again, and basically Nick Fury and Saber's forces were able to help the denizens of both Tarnax and Aladna. So, that's at least some kind of happy ending there. But at the very least, again, the only contributing factor that the Flurkin subplot gave was disabling Saber during the crisis, which I'm just going to be honest here, I think whether Saber was disabled because of the Flurkins or because of Darben, I don't know. I genuinely do not know. I genuinely do not know. I feel like that you could have just said, "Oh, Darwin's faulty space jump points are affecting their ship, and we got to abandon." But ultimately, it just felt like you could have taken that whole subplot out of the movie, and nothing really would have been affected. And as a result, it feels very, very off, and I don't like it. I don't like it. Again, there's still some humor in it, but it just feels, but the tonal difference between that and the rest of the movie just feels way too big of a gap. And which also brings me to another big flaw in the movie, Darwin herself. I don't like Darwin as a villain. She's very lame. And the fact that I had to keep looking up her name in my notes as any indicator, she's a very forgettable villain. Nothing about her is fun to watch. Nothing about her makes me want to come back and see more of her. She is very just run-of-the-mill, conquer other planets, I want vengeance against the hero type of villain. And as a result, she's overly serious and overly dramatic and all that crap. And as a result, it just makes her boring. She's just a boring villain, plain and simple. Literally, like there are plenty of other interesting villains that you could have used for this, and she was not one of them. Her motive, like, you can understand her motives. She's part of the Kree Empire, and they're already conquerors as it is. Combine that with the fact that her home planet is dying, and she blames Carol. Those aren't bad motives. It's just the execution of her character just fell very flat, and as a result, she really does not stick out at all. So, yeah, to her. But with that being said, there is still a lot to like. First, like I said, the writing for this movie is a lot sharper than it was for Captain Marvel, and that's showcased honestly enough with the character interactions. Like I said, one of the problems that I had with the first Captain Marvel was how Carol's character felt like it was being told to us rather than shown to us. And while I was able to get a sense of what her character was supposed to be based on the available information, if they wanted to convey that better, they really just needed to, show that character doing her thing rather than just telling us about all this shit that she used to be. However, this film, I think, is able to, give her a fucking good character. As we see her essentially kind of being pulled in two ways between her guilt and her friends. Throughout the movie, you can see that Carol is trying to make up for for her mistake with Hala. Because, yeah, like the Kree themselves, she blames herself for what happened to Hala and how bad things got. And that was all jump-started by her making a pig-headed decision by destroying the Great Intelligence. At which, to be fair, there's no way she could have known what the consequences were, and the Great Intelligence was not a good guy. These were people that hunted down Marvel because they wanted this super weapon she had, kidnapped Carol and rewrote her memories just because she became infused with all those superpowers, and because she was infused with all that superpowered energy, and they wound up running the Skrulls off of their home planet, and then pretty much just hunting them across the corners of all four corners of the universe, just because they thought, oh, we can't have anyone go because they survived and fought back against us. We can't have that. Pretty much, the Kree are assholes to the highest regard, and the Great Intelligence was the one that instigated all that. But by that same token, they didn't deserve to die. The people of Hala did not deserve to die the way they did. So I like that we see Carol's actions have consequences, and we see how those consequences affect her personally. And it leads to her essentially overcompensating, doing her best to try and hold as much together as she can, but ultimately falling flat. Which we see her getting. When she learns when she learns that Darwin it has some evil plan in place for the planet of Tarnax, she immediately just runs in, despite the fact that her being there could make things worse, since the Skrulls on Tarnax and the Kree are in the middle of a peace treaty. So her being there and her reputation among the Kree could potentially endanger that. And guess what? It did endanger that. As at least before, Darban was offering to help the Skrulls relocate after she did her whole evil plan of siphoning out the planet's atmosphere. But the instant that Carol and her cohorts arrived, she just said, you know what, fuck you guys, I'm just gonna let you all die. So it led to things getting even worse. And then of course when when the Kree forces attacked Aladna, basically despite the fact that Aladna was all but lost, Carol was still fighting and was overcompensating, even to the point where she almost got herself, Monica, and Kamala killed just because she didn't want to be responsible for another planet dying. Which again, that's some good drama, and I like how we see her working through it as the film goes on. Made even better by the fact that as a consequence of these actions, she begins growing distant to people that she was previously close to, especially in the case of Monica. Because I like that we actually get more expansion on Carol and Monica's relationship in this movie. Because Monica, while still clearly caring about Carol, also is keeping her at a distance, and for justifiable reasons. Carol claimed that she would come back to Earth at some point and see Monica, reconnect with her, actually have that familial bond they had before Carol got whisked away by the Kree and became Captain Marvel. But for 3 decades, Carol never came back. And there were times when Monica really could have used her help. Could have had someone be there. Especially in the case of her mother dying. Like, the first time, at least, you can make the excuse that Maria beat the cancer. So at least Monica had something to fall back on when she learned, oh, my mother will be okay. But the thing is, you gotta remember that Monica was one of the people that got blipped away. And so when she learns that 5 years have passed and that her mother got cancer again and died, and it makes sense why she'd be angry at Carol, because at that point, she just wants someone to be there for her. Yes, she's a fully grown woman at that regard, but it was her fucking mom. And Carol was someone important to her. She was an important figure in Monica's life even before she got superpowers. And right now, she needed someone to talk to. Anyone. And I have to keep in mind, and the thing is, the only other person that she could connect to was her new boss at Hammer. And I gotta remind you, that guy was an asshole who was trying to rebuild Vision for his own machinations, despite the fact that doing so was illegal. So yeah, she really didn't have any parental figures to talk to, which will probably explain why she happily decided to go into space with Nick Fury when she was offered the chance. Because 1, she always wanted to go to space, and 2, she probably would have loved anything than to be where she is right now. She just needed someone to be there. And so once Carol is forced back into her life, there's genuine tension. She doesn't refer to her as Auntie Carol anymore. She just keeps calling her Captain Marvel, or when Carol tries to be familiar with her and say, "Hey, Lieutenant Trouble," she's like, "It's Captain Rambo now." Like, she's just trying to stay business oriented with Carol. Even in a moment later on, when Carol and her are on Carol's ship and she helps Carol repair some damages to help keep them moving. Again, Monica is just keeping her at arm's length and begins calling her out on how Carol has been away for so long. It's actually some legitimately good drama, and it really does feel, and you can understand why Monica would feel this way, because Carol was an important figure, but yet Carol never even came back and checked on her, and which is made even worse by the fact that we know that Carol did come back to Earth in the 5-year gap between Infinity War and Endgame, but what happened during that time essentially pushed her even further away from the planet, as well, all she really did, because ultimately she just came back to see Maria before she died, and basically even the conversation was a tense one, as Carol didn't want to accept that her friend was dying and almost refused to take Goose because of that. But it's sad. It's genuinely sad. And when Carol and Monica begin understanding what the other one went through, I like seeing their bond get repaired. When Carol starts realizing all the pain that Monica is carrying and why she resents her so much, it genuinely feels heartbreaking and yet sweet to see them actually try and comfort one another. But then likewise, when Monica learns of the reason why Carol stayed away was because of her newfound status as the Annihilator and how she wanted so desperately to undo all the mistakes that she made, it's sweet. It's sweet, and it also leads to them just growing a lot close. It leads them getting genuinely closer, and it really just fills me up with warm fuzzies. It's actually very good writing that really does build on the relationship the two had, while also expanding on their characters and their own individual journeys. I dig that. Which, kind of going off at which we talked enough, since we talked about these two enough, let's at least talk about Kamala. Kamala herself doesn't really go through that much of an arc throughout the movie, as basically the closest thing she has to an arc is essentially learning that Carol Danvers is not some big pious hero, but is like her, is just a person with superpowers trying to do the right thing where she can and not always succeeding. So there's that, but I'm just gonna be honest here, Kamala didn't need an arc in this movie. She is charming in every sense of the word. She was fun, plain and simple. As not only is she like the designated regular member of the group, as she grew up in Jersey and her biggest threats were mostly Earth-based threats. Well, now we see her fighting alongside her favorite superhero, facing intergalactic crises, visiting other planets, and she reacts the way any fan would react in these situations. Wide-eyed, excited, happy to be there, having fun when she wants to. When Monica and Carol go to Aladna, she's one of the few people in the trio that's just dancing along with everyone and just getting into it. When she sees Carol dancing with the Prince of Aladna, she's just like, oh, and Monica asks her how many chapters of fanfiction is this giving you? It's like tons. Like, Kamala is fun. She's a fun character, and I like her because she feels like an ascended fan, actually finally being, as not only is she a superhero in her own regard, but she's now meeting the person who inspired her in the form of Carol Danvers, and she's having the time of her life, even when things are getting super serious and she has to learn some of the harder realities about being a superhero, like how you can't save everyone and how sometimes you gotta make a tough call even if it means people get hurt. At the very least, I do like how she continues trying to keep this upbeat attitude throughout the whole thing. She's clearly having fun with everything, and she's trying everything and she's clearly just having a ball being in the same room as all these people, while also still realizing this is a very serious thing, and if we fuck this up, innocent people will die. So I like that. I don't really think Kamala needed... Kamala herself doesn't really have a lot of development in that regard. It's still fun to see it happen. And seeing her relationship with Carol and Monica grow throughout the movie as she hangs out with them more, fights alongside them, kicks ass with them, and ultimately just forms a little team with them. It's fun. I dig it. And by the end of the movie, I do like how she and Carol did kind of get that sisterly bond that Kamala always wanted. It's sweet, I dig it, and I find it fun. So, which actually leads to which again, that's another comment I can give the movie. The chemistry between each of our main characters. Like I said, Kamala acting as the fangirl to Carol really is a nice way of showcasing their relationship growing, as not only does Carol have to deal with meeting a new fan, but also essentially having to take care of her and keep her safe while also working alongside her. We got the genuinely good drama between Carol and Monica as they try and repair their relationship, which has already been bent out of shape as it was, but at the same time, seeing the three of them work together, coordinate with one another, and have to start having to learn how to utilize their powers in sync with one another, so not only account for the switching, but also actually working alongside each other in a fight. I think it's actually really cool and really works well for the course of the movie. And kind of going off of that, the action is genuinely fun. I love, despite this movie being a more cosmic type of superhero movie, the fight scenes are a lot more down to earth, very much more close combat, more in your face. And while they do have some more high flying fight scenes at certain points, when they're actually duking it out, it's in hand to hand combat, and it flows all really well. One of my favorite fight scene is honestly the first one where Kamala, Carol, and Monica are swapping places between Kamala's house, the Saber space elevator, and the Kree ship that Carol is sneaking aboard. I love seeing them jumping between all these locations, bringing Kree soldiers with them, and just seeing them duke it out and adapting to their different environments as best as they can. It's fun. It's just fun, and it works really damn well for all the characters, as all of them utilize their powers very well considering the circumstances. It's actually it's really fun. It's really a nice time. On top of that, which On top of that, kind of going off of that whole space angle type of thing, I genuinely enjoyed seeing the different worlds that we wanted to see in this movie. Now, admittedly, the worlds that we see aren't as creative as other space-based films that the MCU has put out. We've seen a lot more creative stuff in films like Guardians of the Galaxy or the Thor films. But for what we have in this film, this isn't a bad selection of movies. Again, Aladdin is the one that probably sticks out the most. As despite the musical aspect, I love the costume designs for all of the citizens of the planet, as it feels like it's just ripped straight out of a Bollywood movie, which I think is exactly what they were going for. And I will give credit where it's due. Seeing the corrupted jump points as they get activated definitely feels very imposing and disturbing and creepy. And kind of even going off of that, the film likes to be creative in a few areas with its editing, like how it uses like split shots to show the locations of all three Marvels as they're having their powers entangled. But one of my favorite scenes, believe it or not, is in the beginning of the movie when we see Kamala just before she swaps places with Carol Danvers, as we see her drawing out her fan fiction of how she would love to meet Carol Danvers, and it's actually pretty creative, and it feels like it's ripped straight out of the Miss Marvel show. So again, I dig it. It's nice stuff. So I'm trying to think what else works. But so yeah, either way, the creative environments of the film, while not being as impressive as a lot of the other MCU projects, it's still mostly fine, and I dig. It's still mostly fine, and I dig it. And I do, and like I said, the way everything goes, I think that overall the chemistry and the tension between as the film goes along is still suitably entertaining enough, and I think it all does work for the most part. Again, I do like how a lot of the central conflict in the movie comes from Carol's own decisions, and how she kind of and how the lesson she has to learn is to get out of her own head and essentially learn to not be it, that she doesn't always have to be this big badass, and that she can rely on people's help. I like that we see her repairing her relationship with Monica, as Monica has to kind of come into her own in the cosmic side of things, and I do like the lasting consequence of seeing her get stuck in another random universe, which we learn again is the X-Men universe, which, by the way, if you expect me to look at all the other X-Men movies because of this, no chance in hell. I did not look at all of the non-MCU Spider-Man movies in preparation for No Way Home, so I am not going to be looking at all of the X-Men movies in preparation for them now being involved with the MCU. I'm not doing that. Just no. So, sorry. But again, I still like that. It does offer more in the way of everything. Again, the action scenes are kick-ass, as I like seeing everyone coordinate with one another and utilize their powers rather effectively. The writing is actually really well done, as I do love the chemistry between each of the main characters and how they're able to bond and grow with each other. I like the different unique environments, and I like seeing them explore it, even if they aren't as creative as other films. And the ending, and ultimately, overall, I think The Marvels is just a pretty good time. Again, it's not a perfect movie. It does have some flaws. Like I said, there's some tonal dissonance between certain scenes which really does not fit very well. The villain in some cases like with some of them feeling a little too silly even for an MCU project, which again, it skirts the line between genuinely fun and genuinely stupid, so I'm still going to count it, but I will still say maybe it's worth watching. The villain herself is genuinely lackluster, to say the least, and as a result, she's genuinely not that entertaining, with her whole plot just being kind of the same generic revenge stuff and all that, even if there was even if the whole conflict with Carol, I think, worked. But overall, I think there's still enough to work with here. Again, the acting for the most part is still really damn good with everyone involved. Again, Samuel L. Jackson turns in a great performance as Nick Fury. The actors who played Kamala's family were a lot of fun, and I think were actually good for comic relief while still kind of showing the grounded side of Kamala's life. The main three actresses, I think, still turned in fantastic performances, as again, you can tell all of them are enjoying themselves, including Brie Larson. I love the writing, I think, is still really good, as as it actually gives all the characters very definable personalities with some very interesting arcs. I love the character interactions between Carol, Monica, and Kamala, as it leads to some genuinely nice stuff as we see them clashing and working together and overcoming things and growing closer. I love seeing them. I love seeing the different environments, and I love seeing the different environments, even if I fully admit they're not as creative as I feel they could have been. And the action scenes, of course, kick so much ass and are definitely a joy to watch. So, while I will not say that The Marvels is a perfect movie, it definitely has its fair share of flaws that do hold it back somewhat. I do think it's also a honestly pretty entertaining movie. And I say that if you really want to see this movie, don't go in expecting it to be this big grand superhero epic. Just go. I think you can just go in, and I think if you just go in expecting a fun time, I think a fun time is what you'll get. It's just a fun little superhero romp that ultimately is not meant to be. It's not anything amazing, but it's not trying to be. It's just a fun cosmic adventure with some genuinely good writing, good characters, and fun action. So on the whole, I say give it a watch if you're interested. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and while next week we're going to be returning back to Steven Universe, the next time we venture back into the MCU, we're actually going to be looking at a trio of movies. Why is that? Well, while I mentioned I'm not going to be looking at all of the X-Men movies, there are a handful of them that will be important for the next MCU film that we'll be discussing. So next time we meet, I think it's time we meet with the... Hold on a second. Well, that ending got ruined. But yeah, the next time we meet, we're going to actually be I think it's time that we were introduced properly to the Merc with a Mouth himself, Deadpool.